accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely, on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag, so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning, 9:30 on Tuesday, the 6th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning to you. So, King's cancer shock. As the King starts cancer treatment, world leaders have wished him a swift recovery.
Meanwhile, Prince Harry will travel to the UK to visit the King, but Meghan Markle is staying in the United States with her 2 children. Will it be a harmonious family reunion?
And where is he? The search enters its 6th day for Abdul, Ezedi, the suspect in the Clapham chemical attack last Wednesday. The £20,000 reward for any information of his whereabouts remains in place. We'll bring you the very latest.
And Sick Note Britain, long-term illness has hit a record high at 2.8 million. That's more than double the number of unemployed adults. And get this, civil servants took 1.8 million days off work in a single year due to long-term sickness.
And Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is to appear exclusively on GB News' People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
And if you missed the QR code, it is there again for you now on your screen. So you basically go up to the telly with your camera, with your phone. I hope I'm not patronising you here, but I know my parents are watching and they wouldn't know what to do.
Nor would I.
Open your camera app and take a picture of that. This is your opportunity to ask the Prime Minister anything that you would like to know the answer to. Let us know your thoughts on all our talking points this morning. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. First, though, here is the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 9:30. The top story leading the news this morning, the Prime Minister says he's shocked and sad to hear of the King's cancer diagnosis and says he's thankful it was caught early. Meanwhile, Prince Harry is expected to arrive in London later as his father undergoes treatment for that unspecified form of cancer announced yesterday. It's understood His Majesty did tell his sons before Buckingham Palace made that announcement about the condition last night. Palace officials hope the news encourages others who are affected by the illness. A British cargo ship has been targeted by an unmanned drone in the Red Sea in the latest of a series of attacks by Houthi rebels. It's understood the vessel did suffer minor damage after it was hit by a naval missile around 60 miles off the coast of Yemen. The ship made evasive manoeuvres before continuing its journey safely. We understand no injuries have been reported. Houthi militants who are backed by Iran have been targeting commercial ships in the region in recent months as part of what they say is an act of solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. In other news, police say that they believe there are people who know the whereabouts of the man that's suspected in the recent chemical attack in South London, who've chosen, they say, not to come forward. Abdul Ezedi is wanted in connection with that attack, which left a woman critically injured and is now in danger of losing the sight in one of her eyes. Police are warning that anyone found to have assisted the suspect will face arrest. That's after a 22-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender earlier this week. He's since been released on bail. Ezedi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station just after 9:30 last Wednesday evening, and police say anyone with information should come forward. And in the last half hour or so, Kwasi Kwarteng has said that he won't be standing in the next general election. Announcing his decision moments ago on social media, he said it has been an honour to serve his constituents since 2010. You may remember Mr Kwarteng served briefly as Chancellor in September and October of 2022. That was for just 38 days, the second shortest serving Chancellor, then succeeded by Jeremy Hunt. That was under the Prime Minister Liz Truss. And for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, we're going to go back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us.
So Buckingham Palace has confirmed the King is already having treatment for cancer. It's unspecified what the cancer is. He's postponing all public duties while that treatment continues.
The King is said to be wholly positive about his treatment, that's the quote, and looks forward to returning to public duties.
And the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, is returning to the United Kingdom today. He's been spotted already at an airport in LA. But his wife, Meghan Markle, is going to stay in the United States with the kids.
So, obviously, this is a huge story. Every news broadcast across the world was interrupted last night to bring this news. I didn't feel shock as such. Maybe I'm just a little too practical.
75-year-old man.
It's a 75-year-old man, and 50% of people now get cancer. So, in that regard, I didn't think it was particularly shocking, especially as he was in hospital to undergo a procedure anyway, and as is the way these days, and particularly for King Charles. I mean, he's going to get the best treatment in the world. The chances are they might have looked for something and found it. But obviously the implications, I guess, for the royal family are potentially significant.
Well, they're thinly spread. The Princess of Wales, she's sick. We're not going to see her till after Easter. Harry no longer is part of the royal family, nor is Prince Andrew, effectively. Princess Anne is already the hardest working royal. How much more can she take on? And it's going to put a lot more pressure on Queen Camilla and William.
Yeah. Ingrid Seward is the editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine and a royal biographer, and she joins us now. Ingrid, you're also the author of the book Mother and I, that looks into the King's relationship with his late mother. What was your reaction to this news? Were you also shocked? I think there's sort of a keep calm and carry on British spirit, isn't there, at the moment?
Well, I think that the King is actually a very private person, so he must have really felt very strongly that he wanted the palace to make this announcement because of, I suppose, the success, you could say, it's probably not a very good word, of talking about his prostate operation. and a lot of people went to get their prostates checked. So he probably feels that being completely open like this is the best way to go. And also, he's king, he's head of state. It is in the public interest. So he really, poor man, has no private life. And this is very much an illustration of that.
Ingrid, he's cancelled a lot of events, functions, so there would have been enormous speculation about his health, bearing in mind his recent trip to the hospital over his prostate. So he had no choice, did he, but to confirm he's having treatment for cancer? And isn't it now only a matter of time, Ingrid, before they tell us exactly what cancer he's got? Because the speculation will be lurid. It already is, in fact.
Yes, I know. The one thing they asked for is he said to stop speculation. But of course, you can't stop speculation about a public figure like Charles. You know, he's our king. And you can't stop speculation. And I quite agree with you. I think it is only a matter of time before we understand what kind of cancer he's got. But I think he'll be probably be towards the end of the treatment. I don't think we'll get it like today or tomorrow. I think it'll be, there'll be a little while before we get it, but I'm sure we will.
It's remarkable, isn't it, Ingrid, because he's been the longest Prince of Wales in the history of the royal family. He's had an incredible apprenticeship, and he's had a pretty good start, hasn't he, in 18 months? He's done a couple of state visits and lots of royal engagements. It will be immensely frustrating for him now that he does have to step back.
It certainly will be frustrating, but of course, being him, as we know, because Queen Camilla has told us, and we know that he is a workaholic, but he's going to have to take care of his health because he wants to make a full recovery, which, we believe he can do. So he will be frustrated, but he will just be working as he always does. But hopefully he won't be working into the small hours of the morning like he used to do.
Ingrid, as far as we understand, Prince Harry is on his way to the UK. What's your reaction to that turn of events?
My immediate reaction is, how unhelpful is that? That's not very kind of me, no. I just thought, you really don't need somebody coming into this mix at this slightly tense moment that is going to cause more problems than they can solve. But of course, Harry wants to see his father, and he hasn't fallen out with his father, despite what he said about the Queen. Charles has remained very calm about it, but the royal family don't like confronting these emotional issues. And I think Harry will come over here. He will be, he'll be perfectly nice to everyone. Everyone will be perfectly nice to him. And then they'll just hope that he goes back pretty soon.
How very British.
Yeah. And also there'll be a lot of speculation, Ingrid, of course, about whether he has any conversation with his brother, because that is well known now, well documented, isn't it, that they have had a pretty spectacular fallout, and we know how angry he was about Harry being so rude about Catherine in that book Spare.
Absolutely. I don't think, I presume that William will see him, but I don't suppose, I'm sure William probably doesn't want to see him, and William will be very busy, as we know, but I don't think it's going to make any difference to their relationship at this stage, because, as I said, they won't be discussing it. There won't be time, and it'll be the last thing that William wants to do.
OK, thank you, Ingrid. Thank you for joining us this morning. Ingrid Stewart there.
That book's terrific, by the way. It's about that book, about his relationship with the Queen. You think the Queen went on for 70 years on the throne. Charles is only 18 months and he's got cancer. It's extraordinary.
Well, tributes from around the world and our politicians have flooded in. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak tweeted, wishing His Majesty a full and speedy recovery. I have no doubt he'll be back to full strength in no time. And I know the whole country will be wishing him well. And
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said on behalf of the Labour Party to wish His Majesty all the very best for his recovery. We look forward to seeing him back in swift full health. Joining us in the studio now is Tory MP for Ipswich, Tom Hunt. Tom, you're a royalist, like me. He's just got to get on with it, isn't he?
Yeah,
that's the royal family way, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like it's been caught early. He has the very best medical, support it's possible to have. So I'm sort of optimistic that he'll be back in rude health soon. But no, it is quite, it's quite a bit of a shock, nonetheless. I'm a huge supporter of his. I think he had almost an impossible act to follow after his mother. But he's done a very good job. I think I've been very impressed with him, and I'm very proud of him as king. And like millions of people in the country, I definitely feel a bit of an emotional connection to him.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I feel emotional connection to royal family. I think they're very special. I think we're very lucky to have them. Yeah, I'm an unapologetic, staunch monarchist.
It's interesting because the only monarch who there would be television programmes interrupted in the United States would be for the king, our king. It wouldn't be the King of Sweden. Belgium. I think if the King of Belgium walked in here, I'm not sure I'd recognise him.
And isn't that great? Isn't that great? Yeah. It really puts us on the map, and yet
they're a great export.
And some people want to get rid of it. I mean, how crazy is that?
Yeah, it would be interesting if Jeremy Corbyn was still Labour leader because he was an avowed Republican. I mean, he'd have done the right thing, of course he would, but an avowed Republican.
I would definitely not want to. I wouldn't want to get rid of the royal family under no circumstances, because I think we'd have Prime Minister Blair waiting in the wings to sweep in. President Blair, sorry. But I think at a time like this, what's quite tricky for the royal family is to keep the public on side when so many people are sat on waiting lists for cancer treatment. When you have a record NHS waiting list of 8 million people, and the King, as we know, will get the very best care. I'm just not sure how that will make a lot of people out there feel about the royal family.
I mean, he is the King of England, you know, so I think most people would...
And Scotland, and Wales.
And Commonwealth.
And the Commonwealth. Yeah, 14, he's head of state in 14 countries.
Yeah, he is. So I think most people wouldn't begrudge him having, you know, 5-star treatment.
But it's not about begrudging. It's not about begrudging. It's just about questioning where the priorities... Whilst the British public at the moment, I think, feel very disenfranchised in a lot of ways, and we feel like the country's broken, I just think it doesn't help the monarchy, in a sense, from a PR point of view.
I disagree. I think there'll be a huge outpouring of sympathy for him, because he's waited all these years to become king, never complained, never explained, and within 18 months he's got cancer.
My initial sense of this, you know, less than 24 hours after the news, is that there'd be great public sympathy and support for him. My Facebook page, I often post on it, and you know, there's a variety of opinion, and often people will feel negative about something. On this one, it's been universal support.
That's interesting.
There hasn't been a single...
And we haven't heard anything from Republic yet. Graham Smith, I think, he normally puts his head above the parapet, but perhaps he's going to wait.
We're very lucky to have the royal family. We're very lucky to have King Charles. And I think, you know, 90% plus of the population will be wishing for him to be back in full health as soon as possible.
But I think you can do both, because I would wish him, as a father and a husband and a grandfather, to be back to full health as soon as possible, as a human being, of course. But I think it just raises that quite tricky question about healthcare.
Stay with us, Tom. I've got to say, by the way, I did say Keir Starmer is a Republican. He isn't. He's an atheist. He is a royalist. So that was... Forgive me for that.
Has he been on the phone? Did he get in touch already?
Just in case Labour, because we know Labour Party watchers, quite right. We are going to get Tom Hunt's thoughts, of course, on the manhunt for the chemical attacker Abdul Ezedi, and his reaction to asylum seekers turning to Christianity to stay in Britain. I can't wait for your reaction to that, Tom.
Don't go anywhere.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's 9:48. Still with us in the studio is Conservative MP for Ipswich, Tom Hunt. Tom, let's look at this manhunt that's been going on since Wednesday last week. A man who has such significant facial injuries in the most surveilled city in the world, and somehow we can't find him. Like, do you think that's a failure of what? The police? I'm surprised they didn't release a description quicker on the night. I'm still a bit baffled as to why that didn't happen.
It seems utterly bizarre to me. I mean, I each day that goes by where he's not been caught or found, it is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
The fact they give him the £20,000 reward suggests they think he's being hidden.
Yeah.
We know they interviewed somebody in connection with potentially giving him shelter who's been released. Now, it could be that they're following that person, thinking perhaps he is sheltering him, but there's also a suggestion that he may have come to some harm. In other words, he could be dead.
Well, I mean, you know, that wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world, but we need to find out what's happened.
And it's looking, again, like the police, I'm afraid, I'm a huge fan of the police, but it doesn't look like they're on top of it here.
Yeah.
The frustration as well, Tom, of course, and lots of our viewers were messaging this the last 6 or 7 days talking about this, is the fact that this is a man who was convicted of sex offences and still allowed to stay. He is one of these people who converted to Christianity and had the blessing of a local cleric to say, yes, he should be allowed to stay because he's now a Christian. He's one of at least 3 or 4 that you can find with a very quick Google search as to the illegal immigrants who've done this.
Well, we know how many on the barge.
And 40, thank you, even yesterday, 40 on the Baby Stockholm. 4 of them got baptised yesterday.
Yeah,
We must send a card. And actually, what does that say about this government's handling of illegal immigration?
Well, look, we know, unfortunately, the Archbishop of Canterbury is very focused on trying to disrupt any attempt to control migration. We know that he believes essentially in open borders. We know that he sets himself against what majority of the public think. And frankly, we know that he's running the church into the ground. And we know that congregations under his stewardship decline and decline and decline. You know, I think there are serious questions about the bishops in the House of Lords. And I think their role in this is shameful.
And he's actually tabling an amendment.
It's unbelievable.
He's the leader of the Anglican flock in the entire world, and he's tabling an amendment to stop us trying to crack down on illegal migration.
The interesting thing is, when I go to churches, Church of England congregations have never been so low.
No.
But actually, you go to congregations to other churches that actually focus on the day job, which is preaching the gospel, and they're actually not doing too bad.
You're quite.
So my advice to him would probably be stick out of politics, get out of politics, stop lecturing people about your fringe views on asylum, and actually get on with the job.
He's defending illegality.
Absolutely.
But it's not illegal. This is the point, I suppose, is that you can convert
but
to
crossing the channel is illegal. They're illegal migrants.
I get it, but this is your government's rule and your government's legislation which is allowing these people to say, oh, I'm a Christian and therefore I can't possibly be sent back to my Islamic country?
I've made my views incredibly clear over the last 3 or 4 years, the sort of changes I'd like to see to our asylum regime. I voted for a number of amendments last month to produce the strongest possible Rwanda bill. Look, I mean, I think it's one thing, you know, if you can evidence that you've been a Christian over in Iran or somewhere like that, and you were, you know, you were a Christian long before you illegally entered our country, and you can evidence that, that'd be one thing. But the idea of just converting when you're over here, and I'll be honest with you, I've come across some of these individuals who've suddenly seen the Lord since they came over here, and I've probed them with questions, and I've said, oh, when did you come? And, you know, the blank looks on their faces when I asked them. You know, I feared for a long time that this is incredibly prevalent.
They're gaming the system.
They are gaming the system. It's a huge chink in the armour of our... So I think... But ultimately, the problem with all of this is at what point are we going to put British citizens first? At what point are we going to think about their interests, their safety, their security? It seems to be that we're putting everybody...
Housing, social housing, is that going to happen? Talk about it. Is it going to be in the manifesto?
Look, we should only be giving social housing to British citizens. Absolutely. You know, ultimately, we only want people to move to this country.
Only British citizens? What, you'd never give it to anybody else?
Unless there's an incredibly good argument for it. But I want people to get social housing, who've been here for a long period of time, who have
paid into it,
who have paid into the system, and who are British citizens. I don't want to be giving it. And there's parts of Labour areas in London where you've got almost 40% of those in social housing aren't British citizens.
Let me ask you, you're a young man, and we had all this debate in the last couple of weeks about if we were going to go to war, and General Sanders, wasn't it, who said that actually he thinks that there should be, perhaps we would need a citizens' army at some point in the next 10 years. And what came out of that debate was how few young people, particularly, let's say, young men of fighting age, feel that they would die for this country or kill someone else for this country. How have we got into that position with so little national loyalty?
Unfortunately, I think the education system is part of a problem. I think particularly universities, but also schools. You know, I think it should be an explicit objective. I think when young people leave the education system, they should be proud of their country. That doesn't mean thinking we've always been 100% perfect, but on the whole, historically, we've been a force for good in the world. And actually, they're lucky to be born a Brit. But that is a collective problem of the West right now. It's this sort of self-defeating, this self-hating attitude, which we need to confront, and we've got to be robust in doing so. So I think we can do that. We've got to have some optimism. We can't be overly fatalistic.
Okay.
We remain a great country, but we need in our schools, we need to be promoting patriotism and love of country. That should be
not allowed to do that, Tom. Tom Hunt and Pete, anyway, good to see you. Talking of national patriotism, we're looking at live pictures from Buckingham Palace, and we'll bring you the latest update on King Charles's health as soon as we get them. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It's going to be a cold day in the far north, mild in the far south, and in between a weather front bringing a spell of heavy rain. Certainly a damp start for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, then the rain edges south into much of northern England, parts of Wales, heavy and persistent for a time around the middle part of the day, and it turns damp later across the Midlands, South Wales and parts of Norfolk as well. But we keep the brighter skies further north. In fact, skies brighten for Northern Ireland and Northern England. However, it is going to feel colder here with northerly winds bringing snow showers to the north and west of Scotland. The far south stays dry ahead of the rain, but it is cloudy and mild here. 13, 14, perhaps even 15 Celsius. But the rain does eventually arrive into the evening, persisting throughout much of the night. Heavy in places with that rain especially lingering across the far south and southwest. That's where the mildest air will be, 7 or 8 Celsius. Further north, under clearer skies, a frosty start to Wednesday, but a bright start for Northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. Still some sleet and snow showers for the north and west of Scotland, and increasingly for parts of Northern Ireland as well. Bright skies in between any wintry showers. Actually, it's a bright day for many on Wednesday, mostly to the north of the M4 corridor. To the south of that, we do have a lot of cloud and increasingly damp conditions.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, up next, do you miss seeing the former Prime Minister Liz Truss on your TV screens? Well, fear not. She's launching something called Popular Conservatism at this moment. At the very time, a poll is showing she's the most unpopular politician in Britain. This is Britain.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just think, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
And
are
remember,
being
a lot of
trashed.
people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid,
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Piers. And, the profits... I think on Clark's Farm I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or
That's
something.
right.
And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. I am all for green protests, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead.
The Tata Steel thing.
Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. Lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time.
Yeah.
So they're protesting, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you
it
say
can't
you
get any more
support some of
obvious.
these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message.
Any of them.
But I do appreciate the message. But sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 6th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pierce.
The King is starting treatment for cancer as world leaders wish him a swift recovery. Our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, has the latest.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has revealed more details about the King's health diagnosis this morning. Meanwhile, Prince Harry has been spotted at an airport in Los Angeles ahead of his flight to London to spend time with his father. More details shortly.
So, as Cameron says, the Duke of Sussex is travelling to the UK to visit the King, but Meghan Markle will stay in the US with their 2 children.
And sick note, Britain long-term illness has hit a record high, 2.8 million, more than double the number of unemployed adults. And get this, civil servants took 1.8 million days off work in a single year, apparently due to long-term sickness.
And Popcon launch. Later this morning, the former PM, Liz Truss, will launch a new, what she's calling, popular conservatism movement, which aims to restore democratic accountability. Ouch, Rishi Sunak. Our political correspondent Chris Hope is there.
That's right, it's Tuesday, so time for another group of Tory MPs to restore the party's fortunes in the polls. Let's see if it works.
And don't forget, the Prime Minister is going to appear exclusively on GB News' People's Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. So let's hear what he thinks about it.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
So the QR code, you get your smartphone, you open the camera, and you scan the code on the screen. It's that simple. Even you could do it.
Doubt it.
If you don't want to do it like that, of course, go to gbnews.com/PM. And just to be clear, you will be in the audience, if you get through, to ask him any questions. Our very own Stephen Dixon will, of course, be hosting the evening. It's going to be on Monday. And I would love for as many of you as possible to get some really great questions, the kind of questions they wouldn't ask them on other channels. Get them into GB News and you might be there doing the job that all the journalists in the country should be doing and frankly aren't doing very well most of the time. gbnews@gbnews.com. That wasn't aimed at you, Andrew Pearce. First though, here is the news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom, 10 o'clock, and our top story this morning. The Prime Minister says he's shocked and sad to hear of the King's cancer diagnosis and says he's thankful that it was caught early. Meanwhile, Prince Harry is expected to arrive in London later as his father undergoes treatment for an unspecified form of cancer. It's understood His Majesty did tell his sons before Buckingham Palace made the announcement about his condition last night. Palace officials are hoping the news encourages others who are affected by the illness. Dr David Pinatow told GB News the King's early diagnosis was fortunate.
His Majesty the King has received what we call an incidental diagnosis of cancer. So he was discovered to have cancer as a result of some form of technical investigation, the details of which we don't know, that has brought the doctors to the attention and the hypothesis of cancer, which we now know is confirmed. So this is something that happens in less than 5 or 10% of the patients that suffer from cancer. The vast majority of people will have some form of symptomatic presentation.
Well, the Prince of Wales is expected to carry out some royal duties on the King's behalf while his treatment continues. Meanwhile, well-wishers are pouring in from world leaders. US President Joe Biden, whose own son died of cancer, said navigating a diagnosis like this takes hope and courage, while the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese wished His Majesty a speedy recovery.
The thoughts of all Australians are with King Charles and his family. We wish him very much a speedy recovery and a return to his duties as soon as possible.
Well, it comes as today we've heard that cancer targets in the UK across the NHS are still being missed, even for those that have already been diagnosed with the disease. New data reveals that 1 in 10 are facing delays beyond the recommended 31 days from diagnosis to treatment. And the figures also show that just 70% of those urgently referred received a first diagnosis within 28 days. That's below the 75% target. Police say that they believe there are people who know the whereabouts of the man that's suspected in a recent chemical attack in London, who they say have chosen not to come forward. Abdul Ezedi is wanted in connection with the attack, which left a woman critically injured and now in danger of losing the sight in her right eye. Police are warning that anyone found to have assisted the suspect will face arrest. That's after a 22-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. He, though, has since been released on bail. Ezedi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station in East London just after 9:30 last Wednesday evening. Police say anyone with information should contact them. The safety and regulation of artificial intelligence is to get a £100 million boost. Downing Street says that they hope the funding will help make Britain a leader in the emerging AI sector. A series of research hubs will be set up across the UK, and regulators will be given training to tackle evolving challenges in fields such as finance, education and in healthcare. In other news, a British cargo ship has been targeted by an unmanned drone in the Red Sea, in the latest in a series of attacks by Houthi rebels. It's understood the vessel did suffer minor damage after it was hit by naval missiles around 60 miles off the coast of Yemen. The ship had to make evasive manoeuvres before continuing its journey safely. We understand no injuries have been reported. Houthi militants who are backed by Iran have been targeting commercial ships in recent weeks as part of what they say is an act of solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Well, in the last hour, we've heard that Kwasi Kwarteng has said he won't be standing at the next general election. He announced that decision on social media, saying that it had been an honour to serve his constituents since 2010. Mr Kwarteng served briefly as Chancellor in September and October of 2022. For just 38 days, he was the second shortest serving Chancellor in UK history under former Prime Minister Liz Truss. Well, that comes as Liz Truss is set to launch today a new movement aimed at rallying right-wing Conservatives ahead of this year's general election. The short-lived Prime Minister is expected to address an event later in central London. She'll be joined there by ex-Cabinet Minister Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. And also Lee Anderson, who recently, you may remember, quit as Deputy Party Chairman over the Rwanda bill. The new popular Conservatives group, dubbed Popcon, aims to amplify calls for tax cuts and tougher policies on immigration. And for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
So the Prince of Wales, the Queen and other working royals will step up their royal duties while the King undergoes treatment for a form of cancer.
We're going to talk to our royal correspondent now, Cameron Walker, who is at Buckingham Palace. Cameron, morning.
Morning, Andrew. Yes, it's very much business as usual for other members of the royal family, but the big elephant in the room is, of course, that it was a huge shock that our head of state was diagnosed with a form of cancer. Buckingham Palace releasing that in a statement last night at 6 o'clock. This morning, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been speaking on the radio, and he said that thankfully his cancer diagnosis has been caught early, and any medical expert will tell you that if cancer is caught early enough, it's far more easy to treat. Now, we understand the King started his treatment yesterday as an outpatient in hospital, which means he's not going to be spending overnight in hospital. He's staying at Clarence House, we believe, in London, but he will be travelling to and from hospital for treatment. And then early this morning, Prince Harry's car was pictured at LAX airport in Los Angeles, presumably to be flying imminently to London to spend time with the King. Now, we've been told that the King personally spoke to both his sons and indeed his siblings to tell them of his diagnosis ahead of the public announcement from Buckingham Palace last night. It does perhaps show that the seriousness of the situation that Prince Harry, bearing in mind he's not on the best of terms with his father over the last few years, is willing to fly very short notice across the Atlantic to be with his father and spend time with his father. Now, the King is not going to be taking part in any public duties for the foreseeable future, but he is continuing with duties behind the scenes, so going through his red boxes, signing government documents, attending Privy Council meetings and meeting the Prime Minister every week. Of course, if his doctors advise it, he could well have to take part in those Privy Council meetings virtually rather than in person. But the Palace are really keen, but we're not going to speculate about exactly what the diagnosis the King has, other than the fact it's not prostate cancer, which is something that they made clear last night. It was a separate issue when he was being diagnosed with, when he was being treated for an enlarged prostate a few weeks ago, that doctors found this separate issue. And of course, it's a tricky balance for Buckingham Palace, isn't it? Because on the one hand, the King is a private individual. He has a right to privacy and private medical information, but he is our head of state, and the public have a right to know about the health of the monarch. As I said, no public engagements will be carried out, but the King is remaining positive, we're told by Buckingham Palace, and looks forward to returning to public duties as soon as possible, but there's been no time frame on that.
OK, thank you very much, Cameron, there at Buckingham Palace. We're going to come to your views in just a moment, but let's talk now to former BBC royal correspondent Michael Cole. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining us this morning. We've been reflecting, Michael, if you can hear me, if you're with us. He is on his way. We've been reflecting, Michael, morning, about the fact that we're using this word cancer shock. Now, maybe Andrew and I are sort of harder to shock, but I suppose it's upsetting, but it isn't shocking that a man of 75, when 50% of people get cancer, might find something during a procedure. But I think the reason that it is impactful, let's say, is the fact that he's only had this job for 18 months as king, having waited in the wings for so long. And I guess it's the uncertainty that this provokes which makes this feel like there are bigger reverberations.
Good morning, Bev. Good morning, Andrew. You make some excellent points there. We live in momentous times, you know, and a lot has changed since 6 o'clock last night, particularly that Prince William will now be, perforce, having to take a more prominent role, something which perhaps he would have preferred to defer for a decade or so. He's going to be front and center for quite a long time now, at the same time as he's looking after his wife, who we know has gone, there we see her in happier times, gone through a quite major operation, the details of which are as yet undisclosed. So at the same time, Prince William will, of course, know that his younger brother is in the country, and the chances of reconciliation are, I think, very slim after Prince Harry accused him of violence towards him and then made other allegations, cruel and unkind allegations against his wife, the Princess of Wales. Even the arrival of Harry presents some problems because the treatment of cancer, as the king is now going to undergo, require people to stay away from other people, to avoid infection. Well, Prince Harry's coming 5,000 miles from California. Of course, the biblical prodigal son is always welcome, but if you remember in the Bible, it says that the father, when the son returned after being a wastrel and wasting his money, the father fell upon his neck, as it says in the St. James's Bible, meaning he hugged him. Well, I don't know how much hugging will be going on because the king will be advised very strongly by his doctors to avoid physical contacts with people because it's all part of the treatment. You don't go near anybody who might bring infection into your world. So it's just your immediate family circle. So a lot has changed, and it's going to be a lot of difficulty things happening. And of course, we are all taken aback by it. While we and the whole of GB community, GB News community, and you, we all wish him the very best of good fortune. He certainly seems to be taking it well. He seems to be showing an outward positive view. And that is only right and proper. And of course, being positive is part of the road to recovery.
It's changed, hasn't it, even since the reign of the Queen, because we were never told, were we, that the Queen actually was had bone cancer diagnosed perhaps a year before she died. And you wonder if she was in this position, if she'd have been as transparent as Charles, although some people think, of course, he's going to have to be even more transparent and tell us at some point what the cancer is he's got because of the speculation.
You're absolutely right. And of course, that was the Queen's way. In those days, you didn't talk about it. And of course, it was bone cancer. That's why it advanced so rapidly and killed her. At the time, Buckingham Palace said it was just old age. I actually think the King and Buckingham Palace have done the right things from the very beginning. They've been as candid as they possibly could be. And they've seen the results. I think they'll be judging this. They'll be seeing the comments, public comments and personal comments from people saying, that was inspirational. I went out and got checked. I did this. I rang up this helpline. I went on to this internet advice forum. And I think that is terrific. And I think when the King takes notice of that, I think maybe he will be even more forthright about what is ailing him. Because that, if you're looking for something good that might come out of it, that is one of the few good things that would, that people are being much more publicly aware of their own personal health and do something about it.
What do you think will be going through Prince William's mind at the moment, Michael? And I don't just mean in terms of his son and being worried for his dad, but I mean in terms of his professional life. This does pose that perhaps events might move more quickly than we might have anticipated 24 hours ago.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it was always going to be, compared with the late Her Majesty the Queen's reign of 70 years, it was always going to be a short reign for King Charles III. But one could have hoped that it went on for a long time. I mean, the Edwardian age was only 9 years, but King Edward VII gave his name to an age which was viewed in retrospect as a golden age. And one could have hoped for a Carolean age that had some length to it. But of course, people do survive cancer, and they go on very effectively for a long, long time. But I think a lot is going through Prince William's mind. He's put his family quite rightly first, front and centre. He's looking after his children. He's looking after his wife. And they are quite rightly his main priority. But the demands of state, the demands of duty are there. Life isn't one long polo match, and eventually one day he's going to have to be king. If all things go according to what we can anticipate. There you see him in happier times at Smith's Lawn playing polo, carefree. Now, you know, the head that wears the crown also bears the difficulties that go with it. And I'm sure he will be concentrating on that. I'm sure he's ready to take his responsibilities. He's taken his responsibilities by going to the RAF, qualifying, acting as an East Anglian air ambulance pilot. He's seen life at the sharp end, and he knows what's in store, and he's accepted it all. After the death of his mother, he wasn't so sure, but then he knuckled down and he said, right, this is my fate, this is my destiny, and he's embraced it. And there he is in much happier times with his beautiful wife, accepting a trophy. Well, he'll be doing quite a bit of that in the future. And I actually think you couldn't have anybody better doing it. I mean, a surprise poll to me, in America, he was the most popular man in the whole world. And that is quite saying quite something.
Wow.
Yeah.
OK, Michael, good to see you. Thank you so much for your insight this morning. Michael Cole there, former BBC Royal Correspondent. Let's see what you've been saying at home. Duncan has said King Charles is very lucky to get treatment so quickly. Some of us still have 43 weeks of a 52-week wait to see a consultant for an initial consultation. That's what I was alluding to earlier. It does pull into focus this situation on the NHS with how many people are waiting for
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the figures here. 65% of people in England received their diagnosis and started their first treatment within 2 months. The King, within days.
Yeah, the target is 85%,
yeah.
And it's only 60.
And the British Medical Association estimates a 4-week delay to cancer surgery. Imagine the chaos that was caused by COVID can lead to an 8% increased risk of dying, which is why they're not hanging around with the King.
Yeah, absolutely. Marion says, sending you best wishes and prayers for a speedy recovery. Your Majesty, you are a wonderful monarch, and your wife, Queen Camilla, and Prince and Princess of Wales are also a credit to our country. Adrian says, let's hope he does well, but I feel sorry for the cancer patients on the NHS who are losing their lives because of the way the politicians have totally mismanaged the NHS and our country. And Tim says, can you imagine having to put up with everyone wanting to wish you all the best, putting in their 2 pence? It must be absolutely exhausting to go through that. And actually, I thought that Ingrid Stewart made that interesting point earlier, that Prince Harry arriving here actually probably does complicate issues. You know what it's like when there's a bit of a drama at home, particularly if one of you's ill or something, and suddenly the black sheep of the family decides to come back and pay a visit. Everyone goes, oh, we've got quite a lot to deal with, and now he's going to turn
the prodigal son.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe I'm just way too cynical, and maybe they are delighted that this is a silver lining to this cloud, that Prince Harry will arrive and make friends with his family again.
It crossed my mind he might come with his daughter Lilibet,
well,
which would be
nice.
Really lovely.
That would cheer
because the
him up,
King hasn't seen her for a very long time.
Yeah.
He's seen her once. And she's old enough to travel.
Yeah.
And she has got the name of the late Queen, the pet name, but we understand he's here coming on his own. I guess the children are staying at home with their mum.
Yeah.
And I'm glad she's not coming.
And in fact,
she is seen as very divisive.
That surprises me that you are glad she's not coming, Andrew. Tim says, be kind to Harry. Many families have a black sheep sibling that becomes estranged. While it may appear that he's been foolish, there are often many dynamics at work that contribute to the situation going back for years.
Well, he's the spare, and he's found it difficult.
Yeah.
And Princess Margaret had issues too, as the spare.
Absolutely. Right. Still to come this morning, former Prime Minister is launching a new popular Conservative movement in London this morning. She was the shortest-serving Prime Minister in UK history.
And she's now currently the most unpopular politician in Britain, with an approval rating of -54%.
According to a poll. She is, however, a big fan of GB News. So we are going to tell you what she's doing. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:24. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Beth Turner.
So Liz Truss, remember her, the shortest-serving Prime Minister in history, the person who apparently, I think there's 2 sides to this story, but she's accused of crashing the pound.
Well, there was a lot of financial skullduggery going on before.
There was a lot of financial skullduggery, and I think, you know, I'm not the biggest Liz Truss fan in the world, but I think she's taken a lot of flack for that, and I don't think it was entirely her responsibility.
Well, at an event this morning, she's going to launch a new movement called Popular Conservatism, and it's to try to rally right-wing Tory MPs ahead of the election, which we know is coming later this year.
But this is, I find it a bit baffling because Popular Conservatism couldn't find a more unpopular spokesperson, according to polls, if they tried. So joining us now is political editor Christopher Hope. Good morning, Christopher. Now, look, she is a divisive character, Liz Truss, and I think she is the butt of a lot of jokes because of what happened under her short premiership. But it seems that within the Conservative Party, she does still wield a lot of power, influence and popularity amongst this very small group. But who are they?
Yeah, morning, Andrew. Morning, Bev. Yeah, more than that, it's about the grassroots. That's where Liz Truss finds her voice, and we saw that at last year's Tory party conference. But it's Tuesday, time for another group of Tories concerned about the direction of the government. And with me now is Mark Littlewood, who's the director of Popular Conservatism. Mark, you're the former Director General of the Institute for Economic Affairs. Why are you here, and what is PopCon?
This is an enormous project, and, you know, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat and a bit of a pit in my stomach having undertaken this huge task, Chris. But listen, this is what we're about. Some people have said to me, are you mad setting up an organisation where the two words are popular and conservatism? But I actually think conservatism is popular, can be made popular amongst vast swathes of the electorate. But the vision that we in the popcorn movement share is there needs to be a major institutional overhaul of the British machinery of government. If you like, the system is pretty much rigged at the moment against achieving Conservative ends. We've had, nearly 14 years of Conservative-led governments, but taxes higher than at any point since the 1940s. Government spending at its highest in our lifetimes. Not many people saying how great public services are. Debt and deficit have become the norm. Regulations come out every day. So we've got to change the infrastructure. There's too many quangos, too much unaccountable authority. We need a restoration and a reset of how Britain works.
But as you say there, you as a Conservative movement have had 14 years. Do you need this group because the centre isn't listening to the base? Is that what the point is?
The Conservatives is a massive family, and we want to actually engage on the grassroots side. There are famously, supposedly, 5 different families of Conservative parliamentarians. I think the media call it the 5 families to bring up echoes of the 5 mafia families in New York in the 1930s. We're not trying to replicate or replace that in any way. We're trying to reach out to the many tens of thousands, millions of people who share a Conservative vision across the country and shine a light on the way that Britain's governmental system doesn't work. And if you don't fix that governmental system, trying to get to lower taxes or less regulation or more efficient government spending is essentially an exercise in pushing water uphill. You might get a bit of the way there, but not much.
Is this a vehicle for Nigel Farage and the like of him?
No, it's not a vehicle for Nigel Farage or indeed for any other individual. Indeed, I've made it plain in the newspapers over the weekend. I think Rishi Sunak should be considered immovable as the leader of the Conservative Party. This isn't any kind of shadow campaign. It's only about the ideas, which you'll hear at our launch starting in, just about half an hour, Chris.
And it's open to MPs and members to join. And how many members and MPs do you have so far?
Well, we haven't sought particularly to recruit MPs. They're actually the target that we want to sort of influence. But you can see behind me the room's filling up nicely here. We could have got more than 1,000 people to this event. I've had to reluctantly turn away people. I didn't realise how popular Conservatism might be. We've already got many thousands who've signed up on our database. That's only a very, very small step. I think it's time that there is a popular Conservative grassroots movement in the UK making this case. And although we're launching in Westminster today, in the heart of the Westminster bubble, we'll be taking our message out right across the country in the weeks and months to come.
But you won't be standing a candidate as an election. You're not a rival to the Tory party in that sense.
No, we're within the Conservative family, completely within the. It's not a separate political party. It's not a vehicle for anybody's leadership campaign. It's trying to get a Conservative vision across in the Conservative manifesto for what's an election year, of course, Chris.
Well, thank you, Mark. I think, Andrew and Bev, you've got a question I can put to Mark Littlewood for you.
I'm really interested in this, actually, Christopher. How are these guys different to these new Conservatives, the Suella Braverman allies, the Miriam Cates, the Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Danny Kruger? What's the difference between those two right-leaning Conservative groups?
Mark, Bev Turner, our presenter, is asking me to ask you, what's the difference between you and the new Conservatives?
I think the new Conservative, there's a plethora of different groups here. What makes us unique is this focus that I just said to you, Chris, that there needs to be massive institutional reform in Britain. It's not about Conservative ends, it's about changing the machinery of government. And I think we're unique in putting that forward loud and clear.
Well, Mark Littlewood, thank you, the head of the new Popular Conservatives. And to my right, I can see Nigel Farage doing selfies with people here. We'll be hearing from him on this show very shortly. Back to you.
We are. That's right. Thank you, Chris. We're going to talk to Nigel very soon, hopefully, when he stopped doing his selfies. Nigel, we're trying to call you. Put your phone down.
Now, still to come, the latest research shows the pension age is going to have to be pushed up again. We'll tell you in a moment what it's going to go up to. I don't think you'd be very happy.
All after your morning's news with Sam.
Just gone 10:30. The headlines from the GB Newsroom this hour. The Prime Minister says he's shocked and sad to hear of the King's cancer diagnosis and says he's thankful that it was caught early. Meanwhile, Prince Harry is expected to arrive in London later as his father undergoes treatment for that unspecified form of cancer. It's understood His Majesty told his sons before Buckingham Palace made the announcement about his condition last night. And palace officials say they hope the news encourages others who are affected by the illness. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales is expected to carry out some royal duties on the King's behalf while his treatment continues. Well wishes are pouring in from world leaders, with the US President Joe Biden, whose own son died of cancer, saying that navigating a diagnosis takes hope and courage, while the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese wished His Majesty a speedy recovery. Police say they believe there are people who know the whereabouts of the man suspected in a recent chemical attack, who they say have chosen not to come forward. Abdul Ezedi is wanted in connection with the attack, which left a woman critically injured and in danger of losing the sight in one of her eyes. Police are warning that anyone found to have assisted the suspect will face arrest. Ezedi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station in East London just after 9:30 on Wednesday evening last week. Anyone with information is being urged to contact police. Kwasi Kwarteng has said that he won't be standing at the next general election, announcing his decision on social media. Earlier this morning, he said that it had been an honour to serve his constituents since 2010. Mr Kwarteng served for just 38 days as Chancellor in 2022 under former Prime Minister Liz Truss. And this morning, we've learned that the former Irish Premier John Bruton has died at the age of 76 following a long illness. Bruton served as Taoiseach from 1994 to 1997. His family says he died peacefully at a hospital in Dublin earlier this morning, adding that he'll be missed greatly. And for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a first look at the morning's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2548 and €1.1691. The price of gold is currently £1,614.43, that's per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,636 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
We're going to go back to Westminster for the launch of Popular Conservatives. Our political editor Chris Hope is joined by Nigel Farage.
Morning,
Andrew,
Chris.
Bev, yes, welcome back to here in Westminster Morning. With you now is Nigel Farage, who's the honorary president of the Reform Party and also, of course, a presenter on GB News. Why are you here?
Well, two reasons. Number one, of course, is GB News. I'll be covering this tonight. Secondly, I'm interested in ideas. I didn't spend 25 years in UKIP without being interested in ideas. And I have a sense that a lot of what's going to get said today by Liz Truss and others will be very popular amongst Conservative activists, Conservative voters, and a broader country as well. And yet, have a look around this room. How many current serving Conservative members of Parliament are here? I think less than a handful. And so the point really is that whilst I agree with many of the things, not all, but many of the things that Liz Truss is saying, within the Conservative Parliamentary Party, she's part of an embattled minority.
Are you joining this group?
No. No, I'm not joining this group. I'm interested in the ideas, and I think after the Conservatives get thrashed at the next election, which, by the way, they thoroughly deserve, then I think maybe, finally, we'll get a reuniting of the right in British politics. It was briefly presented to the electorate in December 2019. It won them an 80-seat majority. The problem was the Conservative Party never really believed in the things they were putting to the electorate. Now, I think a big part of this is just how well Reform do. Every vote Reform gets makes a realignment of some kind more likely.
It makes Labour more likely to be in public government.
I think Labour have won anyway. I mean, I think this argument, oh, don't vote Reform, you'll let Labour in. Forget it. Labour are going to win anyway.
Well, Andrew and Bev, that's Nigel Farage there, the honorary president of Reform and also presenter on GB News.
Fascinating, fascinating. Right, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nigel.
And Nigel will be talking, of course, on GB News tonight.
7 o'clock. Now, in a new GB News series, Innovation Britain, we are looking at the success of British manufacturing around the country.
Reactant fire suppression have just won a huge contract out in Dubai, all because of their infrastructure that Ed here has created in Chelmsford. So tell me the story, Ed.
So we obviously produce fire systems for, one of the areas we produce fire systems for is vehicles. So what we're seeing across the world is a huge investment into the fire protection on vehicles. You're starting to see it more on social media. Battery fires are becoming a thing on buses and coaches. So, but for the most of the part, a lot of public transport is still diesel-based or gas-based. So we've won a massive retrofit campaign in Dubai. That involves a huge quantity of parts, systems, that involves a huge quantity of machine parts. And it's a big logistical challenge, not only to supply the systems, but for the guys and our partner out there to install them. But what the investment that we've done here enables us to do is produce the quantity of parts that we need to get out the door in order to do the supply. And it keeps, for me, the biggest important point with that contract and other contracts is by being here, we don't need to hold the stock levels like a lot of OEMs would for the inevitable, this order might come in, this order comes in. When we get a particular order in, we're just making the parts we need for that particular contract. So unlike with a subcontractor, I'd need to hold all of these parts in stock. I've now got a very dynamic stock system where big order comes in, we make the parts behind us.
There you have it.
Brilliant.
Thinking ahead of that, you're ahead of your game. You're thinking about future-proofing the business and the industry. Congratulations. I think you're going to do really well.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:41, it's Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. And in the studio, we've got lovely Nigel Nelson, our senior political commentator, and the autumn broadcaster, Tonya Buxton.
And funnily enough, during the ad break, we were just talking about the fact that Tonya does not look old enough to have a 27-year-old daughter and that Nigel looks much older than he really is.
Yes.
And
which brings us on to the new retirement age.
Thank you.
Well, there you go.
I'm joking. Although that smoking doesn't do you much good, although I know it makes you happy. Now, retirement age being lifted to potentially 71, but this isn't a few years, though, Nigel, right?
Yeah, it would be in a few years. I mean, you're talking about 66 now, 67 from 2026, then 68 from 2044. That's the plan at the moment. Had we actually done something about all this 50 years ago, when we knew there was an ageing population, the problems it would cause, you could have actually raised the pension, the state pension age very, very gradually, so you'd hardly notice it, say a month a year over that period, but governments were too concerned about votes and they ignored it. So now we're in crisis. If you are going to raise the pension age, you're going to have to bring in some more laws to stop employers getting rid of older workers. Because there's this huge gap that exists between people being laid off from the jobs they've had for ages and then having to wait for a pension. The default pension age where a company could retire you at 65, that's gone. The trouble is they now make people redundant instead. And if they've got to wait years for a pension, there's a real problem.
Is this going to be, Nigel, before we bring in Tonya, is this going to be on Labour's watch? Because the Tories aren't going to do this before a general election.
No, they wouldn't touch it before a general election. And we'll see what Labour do with it. I mean, this is a
difficult one for them.
Yeah, this is actually from a think tank, so it's not a policy or anything like that. But yes, I mean, the pension age will have to rise because the cost is now becoming prohibitive.
And I was just going to say, Tonya, in the way that politicians have kicked this into the long grass, I think a lot of individuals also do when it comes to our pension age. It's not necessarily something we sit around thinking about or planning for.
We don't, and those of us that do and have set up things in order not to have to wait for a government pension, are being trashed by the government to try and keep any of the things that we were trying to do. Like, you know, a lot of people I know had buy-to-let, second homes, things like that, thinking, right, OK, that'll be my pension. Yeah. And because of what the government have done recently with the insurance, everyone's having to sell everything, so they're not, you know...
Which means big, ruthless landlords will snap up the properties and be bad landlords.
Yes, exactly. Big companies. So, because all the people that I know who have got buy-to-let properties, for example, it was for their pension.
Yeah.
And they're great landlords, you know, because it's one or two little buildings that they care a lot about. Whereas once these big companies get it, forget it. So I don't know what's going to happen. You know, if you were telling me now that, you know, I've got a kind of job that I maybe not love and have to then do it till I'm 71 years old, I would be very distressed about this. I mean, if these rules were going to come in now, then anybody who's at the age of 53 would be thinking about working till 71.
And isn't it about the fact that we don't have a savings culture at all anymore, particularly the younger generation, Nigel? They're very spendy.
Well, I mean, obviously, when you're young, you don't think about your pension. I mean, they just don't. I think the real problem there, and this is where younger workers might start resenting it, at the moment, 3.5 workers work to provide the pensions of existing pensioners. It's a myth, the idea that you save for your own pension. And you actually pay for the current pensioners, and so it goes on. What's going to happen by 2030 is that only 2.5 workers will be supporting pensioners. That means they're going to be paying more in tax. So there is a point where I've not noticed any resentment by younger people paying for pensioners, but I wonder if that might, in fact, happen in the future.
But going back to what you said about nobody saves anymore, this all happened during the Blair time, where he was giving out credit cards for, you know, like they were toffees, and not worrying about getting payment back. Everyone felt Feel Good Britain, all of that stuff, because everyone had cash to spend because suddenly everyone could have this. I mean, there was a haloed figure, it was about 130k, that people get into debt till because he wanted everybody to be able to spend and feel good while he was Prime Minister. And now everyone's suffering from that. Pre that time, people were saving. And this is the problem now. We've got to get out of that kind of
and
borrowing.
also, and interest rates, of course. We had such low interest rates for so long that people didn't mind getting into a little bit of debt, whereas now, obviously, it's all gone a bit wrong. Right. Thanks, guys. Great start. Up next, though, a story which is infuriating Andrew and I. Is it right for a coffee shop to refuse cash and accept cards only? It probably happens to you. We'll tell you whether they're allowed to do that. Don't go anywhere.
It's outrageous.
Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have two SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had two brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you can run down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
The growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have, the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
They're still with us. Nigel
Luckily, they haven't left.
and Tonya Buxton. And we're going to talk about the coffee shop that's outraged us.
Right, Tonya, should you be...
Boycott for me.
So we're seeing this, aren't we? We go into shops and you might have some coins, you want to pay with money. Oh, sorry, we don't take cash anymore. Are they allowed to do that legally?
I don't think they were. And so recently I was in a pub having lunch in a pub with a couple of girlfriends in Hampstead, and they said, sorry, we don't take cash. And we said, well, we don't do card. And they said, and we had this whole standoff. It was a whole thing, and they went off to get the manager. The manager came back, whatever. And in the end, we thought, well, we're leaving now. We just left the cash on the table, and we left because we thought we were in our legal rights, but actually... we weren't.
If you're watching...
How did this happen?
How is this
You might get your collar fell when you walk out of here today, don't you?
But how did we allow this to happen? How did we allow the law to change?
Lockdown!
Well,
you're an older person. What have you... My mother never had a credit card.
I blame this on the free enterprise bit because, I mean, that's what's happened, isn't it? That the credit cards are easier for shop owners, they're easier for banks. And that's why it's pushing cash out. What we should have, I mean, the fact that obviously someone can take the payment in whichever way they choose, that's fine, but they should advertise it. So before you go into a shop, there should be something on the window, no cash, only credit cards. And the best way of actually getting them to take cash is to vote with your feet.
Yeah, quite.
When you see that, right, well, we'll go next door, and make sure they know that.
But go in and say, I'm not
coming here because you won't accept my cash. So I'm going to go over the road and go and get a coffee or whatever it might be.
That's only going to work with a little independence. So if you go into one of the kind of chains like, I don't know, Gales or Starbucks or these places, the staff don't care. They won't even say anything, and it's just wrong. It should be illegal to not take cash. That's what I feel where the law should step in.
The old expression, it's legal tender.
Yeah, legal tender. There you go. Exactly.
Isn't that terrible? I think it's terrible that we've got to.
No, I think so as well. I mean, I think especially for older or vulnerable people who really rely on cash. I mean, if you're doing things like travelling around the place, you can do it on a credit card. I mean, I hardly ever use cash. I have 100 quid in my pocket.
I always have cash in my pocket.
I've got it there, but I mean, I haven't. It may have been there for the last 3 months.
Yeah.
But other people...
That's because you're so mean you never buy a drink.
There is that,
You get someone else to buy it.
But if you want to catch a bus or something like that and all you've got is cash, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, you can literally... It's about lack of choice, isn't it? That's what infuriates me.
Yes, exactly that.
Cash is also like a barometer of what you're spending. So one of our producers, Steen, here was saying that his dad would then go to the cash point, take his money out before he went to the pub, and when that money was gone, it was gone.
Time to go home.
So it's time to go home. We don't have that anymore. It's much easier to spend on the card and getting into debt and overspending because you can't see what you're spending.
Right, should we talk about this chemical attacker in Clapham who managed to stay in the country because he converted to Christianity, Nigel? It turns out he's not alone. There's 40 of them on the Bibby Stockholm at the moment waiting to become Christians so that they can stay in this country. It's just gaming the system, isn't it?
Didn't you say 4 were baptised yesterday?
4 baptised yesterday. We're going to send them a card.
Yeah. I mean, and I think this is where the Home Office come in, that they've got to rigorously enforce asylum rules. And if people are gaming the system, yes, they should be dealt with. But this is a Home Office matter. It doesn't mean the whole thing is broken. The Home Office are being very quiet about this case at the moment. They won't explain. Well, there's no evidence at the moment, as far as I can see, he actually did convert to Christianity.
Well, he talked to a Baptist church and an Anglican church.
Yeah, but we can't seem to find the person at the moment. We can't find the person who is meant to have actually signed off on his Christianity. So the question is, how does the Home Office assess this? In the same way, how do they assess somebody who claims to be gay and then can't go back to their home country because they'll be persecuted? It's not so much the system is actually wrong, it's how it's being enforced. And the Home Office is being a bit too quiet about exactly how to do this process.
It looks like a loophole that's being exposed, and it's now going to mean how many more are going to exploit the loophole?
She's going to blow.
The system is wrong and the system is broken. What are you talking about, Nigel? It's completely broken. It's a joke.
Well, not for a few cases. It's not broken.
No, come on,
but this is 40 on the Bibby Stockholm alone.
You know, I take that
Go on,
point.
Tonya. Let her explode.
We are being completely and utterly ridiculed in this country. This man, Ezedi, if I pronounced it right, he has harmed 3 women. Okay, he has been. He's already done time or been a sex offender. He's been in prison. He's been denied twice, and now he's a Christian. He's still in the country. The system is broken. He should have been kicked out as soon as somebody does a sexual offence. You're out. I don't care even if you've been granted asylum. As soon as you break our laws, you're out. The system is broken in this country. We need to get firm.
Yeah, I don't care if you become a vicar.
There's a really interesting letter in the Times today from a cleric saying even when somebody is baptised, there's no way of checking up if they're serious about it. And that's the trouble with these asylum seekers.
We are serious about ending the show right now. We're not going anywhere. We're just taking a break, but don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A three-way split with the weather today. Very windy in the far north, but bright and breezy for most of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Then we've got this wet zone over the Midlands and parts of Wales. A very wet day in Wales. Much of the south dry and cloudy. Snow coming in across Shetland with a very gusty wind here, making it feel really cold across the far north of Scotland. But some brighter skies through the central belt and Northern Ireland. Hazy sunshine on offer here. But it is colder air moving in from the north. Very mild conditions persist across the far south. The rain across the Midlands and Wales will trickle southwards through this evening over southern parts of England, so turning wet here. The snow may ease for a time in Shetland, but then more wintry weather coming in from the northwest. So snow and ice are concern across a good part of northern Scotland tonight. A good covering of snow in places, as well as some slippery conditions on untreated roads and pavements. In fact, a widespread frost across much of northern Britain. Staying relatively mild in the south with the outbreaks of rain here. They'll slowly peter out tomorrow morning. For many, it'll be a bright and a fine day, but a continued risk of snow showers in northern Scotland, continued ice risk through the morning as well. As I said, for many, dry and bright, but the wet weather in the south is going to push back further north on Thursday, and that could give rise to some further snow. So we have further Met Office yellow warnings in place for the snow on Thursday. Parts of Wales, the Midlands, Northern England and Northern Ireland at risk. Check out the Met Office website for the details of those weather warnings.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
We have let Islamist extremism into Britain, we've let it fester, and now we've let it win. Our absolutely spineless surrender merchant political top brass are rolling over while government ministers wear stab vests and quit their jobs in fear. Veteran Tory Minister Mike Freer has had death threats from Islamists, as well as an alleged arson attack on his office. The motive there has still not been established. He's standing down because he doesn't want to die. I cannot emphasise how important this is. A minister of the government is quitting his job because he doesn't want to be killed by a lunatic jihadi. And our Prime Minister has said absolutely nothing. Nothing. A spokesman for Rishi Sunak said he was saddened. Is that it? Our Prime Minister should have been out on the steps of Downing Street saying that we will not be intimidated. We will not let this continue. Enough is enough. What does he do instead? He tweets about XL bullies. Yeah, fantastic. Where's Keir Starmer on this? Well, he's conducting focus groups on how to get the Muslim vote back, so he's hardly going to come out all guns blazing, is he? Ed Davey? Well, there's no way a Liberal Democrat leader would come out and admit that his ideology has helped turn Britain into a poster nation for multicultural failure. The police have let protesters, which include rabid anti-Semites, rampage around London every flipping Saturday for the last 3 months. And today, they are finally saying that they don't support some of the protests, which in the past have included a now banned terror group and people holding up anti-Jewish signs. They're saying, please don't march down Whitehall. All right, but will you do anything to stop them if they ignore you? I doubt it. I honestly cannot believe that we have sunk to the level where a serving minister stands down because of threats from extremists and our Prime Minister just doesn't feel the need to address it.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 6th of February. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So, the King's cancer diagnosis. As the King starts cancer treatment, world leaders have wished him a swift recovery. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has the latest.
King Charles is staying at Clarence House after day one of treatment yesterday for cancer. Meanwhile, the Duke of Sussex is thought to be flying across the Atlantic as we speak to be in London to spend time with his father.
And the Clapham chemical attacker, the search is now in its 6th day for Abdul Ezedi. The £20,000 reward for any information of his whereabouts remains in place.
And sick note Britain, long-term illness hits a record high at 2.8 million people. That's more than double the number of unemployed adults. Are we more health conscious or just skiving?
And the Prime Minister will appear exclusively on GB News People Forum, an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter most to you. This is what Mr Sunak had to say.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
If you missed the QR code, it is there again for you now on your screen. It's your opportunity to ask the Prime Minister anything you want to know the answer to. Get your mobile phone out, scan that code with your camera app, and then you can apply to be in the audience when Stephen Dixon is there hosting the debate between the Prime Minister and you all at home. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbviews at gbnews.com as well. We will get to your emails first, though, the very latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. It's just gone 11 o'clock. The latest on our top story this morning. The Prince of Wales is expected to carry out some royal duties on his father's behalf. That's while the King's treatment for an unspecified form of cancer continues. Prince Harry is also, we understand, expected to arrive in London soon. It's understood His Majesty did tell his sons about his diagnosis before Buckingham Palace made the announcement last night. Palace officials are hoping the news encourages others who are affected by the illness. Dr David Pinatow told GB News the King's early diagnosis was fortunate.
Majesty the King has received what we call an incidental diagnosis of cancer. So he was discovered to have cancer as a result of some form of technical investigation, the details of which we don't know, that has brought the doctors to the attention and the hypothesis of cancer, which we now know is confirmed. So this is something that happens in less than 5 or 10% of the patients that suffer from cancer. The vast majority of people will have some form of symptomatic presentation.
Rishi Sunak has also said he's shocked and sad to hear of the King's diagnosis, but said he's thankful it was caught early. Meanwhile, members of the public in London have also expressed their best wishes for His Majesty's recovery.
Sounds nice. I mean, like, this whole family feud thing seems a bit silly in my opinion. They should all make up and hopefully this brings them together a little bit more.
I mean, you know, he's got to come back to see his father, hasn't he? I mean, it's the right thing to do.
It's our first time to London and we're kind of like, oh.
Yeah, we saw it last night.
Like, oh no.
We saw the headline
here
last
we come to
night.
London and that happens. It was sad.
Yeah, our prayers are with him, so yeah, and his family, so.
It comes as cancer targets across the NHS are still being missed, even for those that have already been diagnosed with the disease. New data has revealed that 1 in 10 in the UK face delays beyond the recommended 31 days from diagnosis to treatment. The figures also show that just 70% of those urgently referred received a first diagnosis within 28 days. That's below the 75% target. Police say they do believe there are people that know the whereabouts of the man that's suspected in a recent chemical attack in London, who they say have chosen an attack that left a woman critically injured and in danger of losing the sight in her right eye. Police are also warning that anyone found to have assisted the suspect will, they say, face arrest. That's after a 22-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. He, though, has since been released on bail. Ezedi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station in East London just after 9:30 last Wednesday evening. Anyone with information is being urged to contact police. Kwasi Kwarteng has today said that he won't be standing in the next general election. Announcing his decision earlier on social media, he said that it had been an honour to serve his constituents. Since 2010, Mr Kwarteng served as Chancellor for just 38 days in 2022, the second shortest ever Chancellor under the former Prime Minister Liz Truss. Liz Truss will also be launching a new movement aimed at rallying right-wing Conservatives today ahead of this year's general election. The short-lived former Prime Minister is expected to address an event in central London later, and she'll be joined by the ex-Cabinet Minister Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, along with Lee Anderson, who recently quit as Deputy Party Chairman over the Rwanda bill. The new popular Conservatives group, dubbed Popcon, aims at amplifying calls for tax cuts and bringing in tougher policies on immigration. In other news, a British cargo ship has been targeted by an unmanned drone in the Red Sea. That's in the latest in a series of attacks on commercial ships by Houthi rebels. We understand the vessel did suffer minor damage after it was hit by naval missiles around 60 miles off the coast of Yemen. The ship made evasive manoeuvres before continuing on its journey safely, and we understand no injuries were reported. The safety and regulation of artificial intelligence is set to get a £100 million boost. Downing Street hopes that that funding will help make Britain a leader in the emerging AI sector. A series of research hubs will be set up across the country, and regulators will be given more training to tackle evolving challenges in fields such as finance, education and in healthcare. And this morning we've heard that the former Irish Premier John Bruton has died today at the age of 76. That's following a long illness. Bruton served as Taoiseach from 1994 to 97, and in a statement today his family said he died peacefully at a hospital in Dublin early this morning, adding that he'll be greatly missed. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. Let's see what you have been saying at home this morning.
Lots and lots on Harry, by the way.
Yeah, John said, I think it's very strategic for Harry to show up now after the announcement was made to the public. Surely he must have known about this earlier, but for him to fly in now seems like a PR stunt.
You just don't know. I mean, we don't know when the King got his diagnosis.
True.
He was in hospital. He came out of hospital last Monday. He was at church on Sunday. You know he was back in London on Monday for treatment. I don't know how quickly it came through. Tim says, be kind to Harry. No. I'm going to be. Sorry, Tim.
And let me have a look at yours. You've got the latest ones. And John has... yep, you're right. You've done that one. And Sandra says, if Harry brings his children, that would make the King feel better.
Well, I did say it was a great opportunity for us to get to meet Lilibet.
Yes, it would have been nice to see. Have we seen much of Lilibet?
I think we saw her once.
She's been on Netflix
alive. Yeah.
That's the problem, is we don't trust Meghan and Harry, do we? We don't trust their instincts now, do we?
Also, is the King going to tell his son what form of cancer he has? Because Harry, I'm afraid, has form for putting stuff in the public domain they don't want in the public domain.
That would be bad.
Well, if there was a leak, would they blame him? Because, I mean, my own view is at some point they will tell us what form of cancer he's got. Look, he doesn't have to. It's private. But he's the head of state. He's the King. There's lurid speculation already all around the world. We've speculated because people want to know, and he is the monarch.
And the funny thing, like Harry jumping on this plane is classic Harry, isn't it? There's a little bit of limelight, and his wife's probably pushed him onto that. Go over there and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Because unless this is very serious, and we hope it isn't, and the message from the palace is that, you know, this is caught early, etc., why would he be leaping on the plane to come and see his dad at this point?
He needs to remind people in the United States, which pays his bills, he's a royal. So he's got to, that's the point. I mean, of course he loves his father. I'm sure he does, though he's paid very badly. But he does have to remind people in America, I'm Harry Wales, I'm the Duke of Sussex, and the way you do that is by going to see the King.
At a time like this, I need to be there.
Yeah.
Well, someone else who needs to be there at a time like this is our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. He's at Buckingham Palace with the latest. Good morning, Cameron. Not even 24 hours since this news broke last night, but some people might only be just turning on their telly for the first time and finding out what's happened. So bring us up to date. What do we know?
Yeah, Bev, so at 6 o'clock last night, Buckingham Palace released a statement where they confirmed that the King is experiencing or suffering from a form of cancer. Now, Rishi Sunak added to that, the Prime Minister, this morning by saying, thankfully, the King's diagnosis was caught early. And of course, any medical details professional will tell you that if a cancer is caught early, it is far more treatable. But nonetheless, a cancer diagnosis from our head of state is clearly very worrying and concerning. We're told that it's not prostate cancer. If you remember, a few years ago, the King, sorry, not a few years ago, a few weeks ago, the King was in hospital receiving treatment for an enlarged prostate, which was benign, and it was during that treatment that doctors discovered this separate issue. He's being treated as an outpatient, so yesterday he received his first treatment in hospital, but he's very much staying at Clarence House and not staying in hospital overnight. Meanwhile, this morning, Prince Harry was spotted at Los Angeles International Airport, LAX. He is thought to be on a plane right now, flying across the Atlantic to London to be with the King. It's understood that the King personally told both his sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, about his diagnosis ahead of that public statement at 6 o'clock last night. The King also told all of his siblings, so Prince Andrew, Prince Edward and Princess Anne as well, before that announcement. He is still well enough, as we understand it, to carry out his constitutional duties. So he's going to be behind the scenes, going through his red boxes, signing government papers, attending Privy Council meetings and things like that. But we're not going to see him in public for some time. It's also understood, though, that members of the royal family are not going to have to deputise on his behalf as councillors of state, that members of the royal family in the line of succession over the age of 21 who carry out his constitutional duties on his behalf. That's not necessary, I'm told, but the door is open for Prince William in particular to pick up some of the King's duties if the King cannot do it, but not perhaps in a formal capacity as a councillor of state. There's a big balancing act for Buckingham Palace. You spoke, Andrew and Bev, about a lot of speculations going around as to exactly what kind of cancer the King has. On the one hand, the King is a private individual and he has the rights to private medical information, but of course he's also head of state, and the British public and the public around the Commonwealth have a right to know about the health of the monarch. So Buckingham Palace haven't ruled out giving us more details, but they're certainly not going to be providing a running or regular commentary on the King's condition. So no public engagements for the time being. The King, we've been told, is remaining positive and is looking forward to returning to public engagements when he can.
That's Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent. Thanks. So we're going to talk now to Tom Bauer, who's a great authority on matters royal, has written a very interesting book on the King Charles. I think Tom's joining us. If he's not, we'll carry on talking to each other.
You know what I was thinking I would quite like to ask Tom when we bring him up is, what is... Are you there, Tom?
We've got him now.
Great. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Good to see you. I'm just thinking about the historical context of royals and their ailments. And I know we live now in a time of wall-to-wall media, but how typical is it for us to know such detail about a ruling monarch?
Well, very untypical. I mean, the Queen, after all, we didn't discover and still don't know what she died of. It's just on her death certificate, it said old age. But we know that she had some form of cancer as well. And, of course, her father died without us knowing anything about his illness. So I think King Charles's declarations are quite unique and set a precedent.
Do you think, Tom, that's because there would have been all sorts of speculation now? We've got social media now, 24-hour media. Or do you think this is a genuine attempt by the palace to be more open and transparent? Because you know where we then go with the next question. Do they then at some point tell us what sort of cancer he's got?
Well, I think there was no alternative because, after all, he's now disappeared from public view. And so they had to give some sort of explanation, as they did for Princess of Wales as well, Kate. The truth is that when you disappear, there are questions asked. I think in the end we will discover, both about Kate and about Charles, what he's got, what they both got. But really, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I do think they're entitled to some privacy.
It really brings into focus, Tom, how light the substitutions bench is for the royal family at the moment. What kind of conversations will be going on? Oh, there's Professor Angus Dalgleish has joined us in Vision. Wait with us, bear with us, Angus. We will be with you in just a moment. But if we can go back to Tom. Tom, I was just saying then about the fact that you realise that there aren't that many subs sat on the bench at a time like this now for the royal family, and lots of engagements will still have to be carried out. What sort of conversations will be going on behind the scenes?
Well, we know that they've got a pretty big staff in Buckingham Palace and elsewhere in the other palaces. They won't find that much difficulty to somehow fill the slots. There, after all, there's Prince William has now rejoined the working royals. There are the Edinburghs. There's a few others. Princess Anne. I don't think it'll be a desperate struggle. Clearly, there's also Queen Camilla. They'll pare some things down. I think more in question are the foreign trips that the King arranged, both to Canada and to New Zealand. Those are in question now.
Yeah, and of course also, Tom, there are countries that we think possibly will be thinking time to end the monarchy. Charles might want to be thinking of going to those sort of countries. Foreign travel may now be restricted to him because of his condition and his age.
Well, I think there's always been a problem. I think that King Charles looked pretty unhealthy, in my view, already last year. Queen Camilla, we know, has got various health problems, not least of which as well is that she finds travel very tiring and can't do jet lag at all. And so I think they were really cutting it down, or hoping that Kate and William would take over. There is a challenge for them, not least in the Commonwealth, because they do need to wave the flag to show that they are the monarchs of those 14 countries as well still. There are huge challenges, not least set up by Harry and Meghan, who have caused endless trouble with their big mouths.
And, of course, Harry's flying back today to see his father, Tom. We were saying earlier in the programme, would the King be able to tell his son what sort of cancer he's got? Because he has got a bit of form, I'm afraid, for being indiscreet about matters royal. And, of course, if it was to leak and the finger was pointed at Harry, that would cause even more problems in their already very strained relationship.
Well, he's indiscreet, Harry. I mean, he does everything to promote himself and has caused huge problems by his disloyalty and treachery, and I must say as well, his lies. So I find the return of Harry at the moment very suspicious. I think it's very much because the King pleaded for some sort of reconciliation, but because he's after it is his son, and I'm sure the King feels some guilt about the divorce with his mother, with Diana. But I wouldn't trust Harry at all. I think he's got form for disloyalty. I think his wife has got absolute form for never reconciling with her own family or friends and former husband. So I think that Harry's arrival is not good news. And I think it's very much part of Harry on a self-promotion trip to give himself publicity, to give himself some sort of fame, a moment in the spotlight. Because after all, we must remember that when the King's prostrate problem was announced, there was a deafening silence from California. Harry never announced that he hoped his father would have a speedy recovery or anything like that.
And so the Princess of Wales, of course. Yeah, and thank you, Tom. And the response to the Princess of Wales, Tom Bauer there.
I agree with what Tom said about her, I'm afraid. I think he can't be trusted, and I do think this is... Look, I can't put my mind... I can't get into his head, but I think this is a lot about how this will look back in the United States.
Probably.
Son goes off to join his sick father.
Yep, do you agree? Joining us now is oncologist Professor Angus Dalgleish. Hello, Angus. We had a brief introduction to you there a little early. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for joining us. Right. A man of this age, 75, goes in to have his prostate procedure, and we don't know what that will have involved, and comes out with a cancer diagnosis. How unusual is this, and what sort of procedure might they have done in order to find another cancer?
Well, first of all, he would have had a very high-definition scan before he went in for that operation to make sure that's all they were going to be looking at. And that operation he had is very, very common. I mean, it's unbelievably common, particularly in men over 70, and where you basically just bore out the prostate so you can pass water a little better. The side effect of this procedure is you get to see the inside of the bladder. and you might see something that wasn't picked up on the scan. That's the sort of thing that I'd be considering. But if this is the case, I think the message is that this is very good news because it will be very early. It'll have been very early because there were no symptoms or signs of this other than that due to his enlarged prostate. And I do think we need to not lose sight of the fact that early cancer diagnosis has fantastic long-term prognosis. I mean, the management of the cancers now, when they're early, are incredibly good. I mean, we've really improved the long-term survival of all the major cancers, with one or two exceptions. So I think that I would be looking on the bright side of things here, that as a byproduct of having a procedure to make him function better, they've discovered something which might not have appeared for another couple of years, when it might be, well, it would be more advanced because it would be giving some symptoms. But they've got it early before it ever gave any symptoms. And I think that this is very potentially very good news. He started a treatment. He's going to have it. It's outpatient. And hopefully this will be one of the many such treatments that we give to patients with early cancer to stop it ever coming back again. So I really think we should not be too pessimistic about this.
And do we assume he's going to have some form of radiotherapy or even chemotherapy? Because that can be done as an outpatient. And I'm told, I was reading this morning, you can also have chemotherapy in tablet form.
Well, I don't know exactly what he's going to have because I don't know the diagnosis. But you're quite right, chemotherapy and radiotherapy are both given as outpatients, and quite a lot of chemotherapy now is given in tablet form, so there's no need to be an inpatient at all. So almost certainly he's having, it was alluded that he was having some form of regular therapy, which could be a chemotherapy, could be administered either in tablet form or a drip or more locally, depending on the diagnosis.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Well, lots to be cheerful about there, I think.
And very upbeat, and that is the point. The Palace did say in a pretty upfront statement for the Palace, they've got it quick. Yeah. And he's confident, and he's hoping to be back to it. And he's still going to carry on doing his official papers. He's still going to do his audience with the PM, but that will be almost certainly on the telephone or by Zoom. That was happening all the time during COVID, and particularly with Her Majesty the Queen, who was infirm for a lot of her last months.
Right, up next, what are the police doing in this hunt for the suspected chemical attacker Abdul Ezedi? It's been 6 days since he went missing. Where is he, a former top cop? Joins us next with Britain's Newsroom on GBNews.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of 3 abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And it's 11:25. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. The manhunt for the chemical attack suspect Abdul Ezedi is now in its 6th day.
That's right. Abdul Ezedi has been on the run since the attack on a woman and her 2 young girls in Clapham on Wednesday.
So at New Scotland Yard is our very own reporter, Ray Addison. Ray, can you tell us what the latest is? Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, well, the latest is the search is very much focusing on the South London area. That's because that's the last known confirmed sighting of Ezedi around about 9:50 on Wednesday evening. He'd come out of Tower Hill Tube Station and then walked across All Hallows Lane. And we can see the image that's been released by the Met of him there on All Hallows Lane. And he has that distinctive black jacket zipped up, the hood up as well, and pulled tight around his face, perhaps trying to disguise that injury to the right-hand side of his face. Grey pants, full-length pants, and white trainers as well. And then we heard that there was this arrest in the early hours of yesterday morning of this 22-year-old man on suspicion of assisting an offender. He was taken to a South London police station and then released later that afternoon on bail. Police saying that they are tracking Ezedi, or have been tracking him using his bank card, which he used to get on the tube. However, he hasn't been used since Wednesday. So what's happened to him? Has he perhaps come to some form of harm, or is someone sheltering him?
Very much, Ray. Ray Addison there down at Scotland Yard. Well, joining us in the studio now is former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Peter, good to see you. Now, you're saying, listening to some of that you feel like they don't seem to have any current information, strangely.
No, the latest sighting of him that we've been told about and that we've seen from a CCTV image is 9:47 p.m. last Wednesday.
It's nearly a week.
It's Tuesday now.
Yeah.
And, OK, so somebody got arrested yesterday, but they've been released on bail, so there clearly wasn't a raft of very obvious evidence able to charge that person and keep them in custody. This information is getting on for 6 days, and it'll be a week tomorrow.
How can somebody, particularly someone with an injury as prominent as that, just vanish?
Well, two theories that the police are working on, and they are the blatantly obvious, that he's dead in a ditch somewhere, or a canal, a river, a stream, a sea. Who knows? Often water is very slow to give up its secrets. Or he's being harboured and somebody is feeding him, clothing him, putting a roof over his head, maybe transporting him, misguidedly so, of course. And if that is the scenario and he does get found, those people will be charged. It's only a few days or so since the police charged somebody with assisting an offender in relation to Daniel Khalife, the guy who escaped from Wandsworth Prison, who's awaiting trial and denying all charges, I must say. But that just goes to show that in all that time later, they still went out and nicked someone with the allegation that they assisted that escaper.
They'd be relying, the police, of course, on intelligence from the area. And we know that he was seen in the Tower Hill area and Tower Hamlets, where there is a large proportion of Muslim. It's almost a monoculture down there. And would there be police officers who would have the sort of relationships in those communities that they could go and say, look, if you are harbouring him here, we need to know about it? Or do we lack that sort of interaction with those communities and the police?
Is it 1990? Because we might have done if it was back then.
Really?
When neighbourhood policing was very much a thing, properly funded, properly respected and regarded, held in some esteem, not by those people that prowl the corridors of power in policing, because they, of course, always misguidedly think, well, how can you measure the effectiveness of a police officer who goes out for 8 hours a day and talks to people?
Because you want a cop who can go into the local mosque.
Exactly, of course you do.
Talk to the imam.
Of course, and those officers, those neighbourhood police officers, there is an element of it creeping back in certain places, but it's nowhere near at the levels universally across the UK that it needs to be. Those officers would come back to the police station invariably awash with tea and awash with information. And then they go to scroty, jean-wearing trainers, detectives like me, and say, you know that burglary that happened 3 days ago? Well, actually, it's down to him, and he lives there. And then, of course, the following morning, his front door would disappear off its hinges, and he would never know where that information came from, because the community officers were so trusted, were so known, people knew their telephone numbers, they knew where they could get hold of them, because in those days, we had police stations.
And has that culture slightly changed because of the way that evidence has to be admissible in courts now? Is it because we've got much stricter rules, probably ushered in under Tony Blair, I would imagine, about what you can and can't do to get information from people?
The rules of disclosure, of course, are very important and fundamental to the justice system, but courageous lawyers, courageous prosecutors will always push the boundaries of the law. The law is a moving, evolving thing. It changes every day. There will be a precedent set in some Crown Court today in the country, will then apply, but wasn't in place last week. It's how the law evolves, and courageous prosecutors will always challenge and push the boundaries as much as they can, and even go beyond them to set precedents. Protecting sources is absolutely fundamental to policing, but of course, handling informants is somewhat frowned upon these days.
This man, is finally, Peter, is very dangerous. How big a priority, operational priority, is this for the Met?
It's a huge priority for the Met. It's such high profile, and we must, of course, remember that there is a 31-year-old woman lying critically ill in hospital, and 2 children were assaulted as well in that incident, together with Good Samaritan members of the public who rushed to the aid of the victims. So it's very important. It's in all the papers. The King's dreadful diagnosis, I'm afraid, has probably bought the Met Police another couple of days, because the King rightfully is on all the front pages. At some point, those papers are going to say, when does the police endeavour now become an embarrassment? When are those banner headlines going to scream from the front of all of the papers, why can't you find him?
Absolutely right, Peter.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Great, as usual. Right, plenty more to come on Britain's newsroom. I nearly called this news round. We're not. On Britain's newsroom now, Sam Francis with your news.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's just gone 11:30. Our top story today, the Prince of Wales is expected to carry out some royal duties on his father's behalf while the King undergoes treatment for an unspecified form of cancer. Prince Harry, we understand, is also expected to arrive in London soon. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has said he was shocked and sad to hear of the King's diagnosis, but Rishi Sunak said they'll crack on with everything, signalling their meetings will still continue. Palace officials have said they hope the news of the King's diagnosis will encourage many others who are affected by cancer. Police believe there are people who know about the whereabouts of a man suspected in a recent chemical attack who've chosen not to come forward. Abdul Ezedi is wanted in connection with the attack in London last week that left a woman critically injured and in danger of losing the sight in one of her eyes. Police are also warning that anyone else found to have assisted the suspect will face arrest. Ezedi was last seen leaving Tower Hill Tube Station just after 9 o'clock last Wednesday evening, and police are urging anyone with information to come forward. Kwasi Kwarteng has said today he won't be standing at the next general election. Announcing his decision on social media earlier, he said it had been an honour to serve his constituents since 2010. Mr Kwarteng served for just 38 days as Chancellor in 2022. That was under the former Prime Minister Liz Truss. Around 8 million people will today receive the last of 3 cost of living payments. The payments will be made directly into bank accounts, and those who are eligible won't need to apply. The former Irish Premier John Bruton has died today at the age of 76 following a long illness. Bruton served as Taoiseach from 1994 through to 1997. His family says he died peacefully at hospital in Dublin earlier this morning, adding that he'll be greatly missed. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2540 and €1.1692. The price of gold is currently £1,615.01 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,651 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Afternoon. Good afternoon, Britain. They're here, Tom and Emily. Are you talking about the King?
Well, we're talking about a specific element of it, which is, should Prince Harry be welcomed back into the fold? We know he's flying back today. He's been separated from his family for years now. He hadn't spoken to his father in a long, long time. Could this be the instigator of a rapprochement? Could this be the moment at which perhaps some healing is done in more ways than just medically?
Perhaps I'm naive, but wouldn't it be absolutely lovely if Prince Harry came back to Britain and recommenced his royal duties?
You are naive.
Wouldn't it be lovely, though?
No, that's naive.
I've got a theory about why Emily Carver wants Harry back in the royal family. It's ginger solidarity.
Well, yes, there is a little bit of that. My brother does actually look a little bit like Prince Harry.
I think, on a human, personal level, I like the idea of a family being reunited after a conflict. But can they do that on the global stage? I'm just not sure. There's been so much mud slung.
I think what's sad is the grandchildren as well. They have no relationship, as it seems, with their grandfather.
He could have brought them with him.
Yeah, that would have been really nice.
We might have seen Lilibet.
Although if he were to bring his children with him, he'd have had to have brought his wife.
Well,
and if there's one thing...
Not necessarily.
If there's one thing that the King does not want to see right now, it's Meghan. It's the person that's caused him so much anguish over the last...
Yeah, but it's easy to blame Meghan, isn't it, Tom? He's the royal. He didn't have to allow this to happen.
No, he didn't. He didn't. I think it would be wrong to put all of the blame on Meghan, and clearly there's been a lot of hurt over this. But also, it does seem that Harry has been seduced into a world of glitz and glamour and Hollywood fame.
How much does he like it? Who knows? But also on the politics side, this popcorn, popular Conservatives with Liz Truss at the forefront. Do you know what? I think it is a bit of a pop-con. Because I don't believe that Liz Truss has ever advocated for strong borders, robust border control. She is very much a Liberal. She is very much a Liberal. When she was Prime Minister, there was a lot going on with the Treasury about how they could liberalise visas, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right. She did want more liberal visa regimes for legal migration for countries of similar wealth, but she also did want tough situations for illegal migration. So I think perhaps you're being a bit harsh on it there, because it's all about control. She did, and she wanted more deals with more countries beyond Rwanda.
We have to move on for now, but you have got the whole afternoon with Emily and Tom. For now, though, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The time is 11:42 with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. The panel are back.
They are indeed. We are joined by GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, author and broadcaster Tonya Buxton in the studio. But first, GB News spoke to the people in Hull to hear their reaction to the news that King Charles has cancer.
Very disappointed and upset for him, and I hope he gets a bit better.
I think it's devastating, but I don't know how bad it is, so there's treatments. Wasn't expecting it at all. Yeah, and it's so sad, really.
He's just like the rest of us, isn't he? He's not infallible. I just think it's sad. It's the same as any family. If someone gets that sort of news, obviously, it's going to be devastating.
It's sad, isn't it? But just sad.
The very down-to-earth attitude of people in Hull. Yeah. There's a lot of common sense there, Nigel Nelson. It is sad, and people do feel if any of the senior royals are unwell, it does make us pause and think, doesn't it, about our own lives and stuff. But actually, as we said, he's 75 years old, and 50% of people will get cancer.
Yes, and so in a sense, it shouldn't be a surprise, and there is a history of cancer in the family.
Yeah.
Obviously, what we don't know is the detail. If this was an American president, we'd know every single thing that was going on.
Do you think we should already know?
Well, I mean, obviously, even if you're the king, that you're entitled to privacy about a medical condition. So I can understand that. The question really is that obviously people are curious. People want to know how bad is it? Where is it? What is it? So I think a little bit more information. Now he's gone this far and he's prepared to put it out there.
Because he was so transparent about the prostate just 10 days ago.
Yes.
And the statement today or yesterday is a bit more opaque, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah. And I think that obviously you can just see from what we saw in Hull, people are genuinely concerned. His subjects want to know he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it would be nice to have a little bit more detail.
I'm not sure, Tonya. I don't feel I need to know any more detail. I don't like this culture of not having medical privacy.
I get that, but he is in the public eye and he is one of our leaders, and I think it actually gives a bit of, in funny kind of way, comfort for people that are suffering. Look, the King's got it too. He's going to recover, hopefully. It all goes well. It does sound like it's one of the cancers that you can quickly get over. And he's older. You know, it's different when you get cancer when you're young.
Yeah.
Because when you're older, you're not rejuvenating as much, so they tend to be slower. You know, people have got to die from something. People have lived with cancers for years, so I'm not... I understand why he said it. I don't need any more details. I don't need any
I think
more.
it will come, though.
I think it will come out, it will definitely come out. I'm more interested, to be honest, in the family politics of it all. Because,
Harry coming back?
I mean, if I was William, I would be seething. Here comes the prodigal son riding in, you know. He's done everything he can to give stress and give ill health to his family, and now he's coming back.
Well, I mean, the book caused huge distress.
Yeah.
It must have done, Spare. It was very rude about Queen Camilla, Kate. I mean, it was incredible.
And I
a full
understand
frontal
why.
attack.
And I completely understand why William doesn't want to speak to Harry. I mean, I think he's shamed himself. He's shown that he's not stoic, he's not honourable. And here he is coming back to do what to his dad?
Although I would just... There is nothing like a kind of a situation like this, though, to put into perspective petty squabbles with family dynamics.
I think so.
I wouldn't call it a petty squabble.
No.
I would say it was a major squabble. It would be international
Whatever the squabble was, I mean, there is a human story here, isn't there? That what we do know is that Harry spoke to his father yesterday. As a result of that conversation, and we don't know what was said, Harry hopped immediately on a plane to come home to support his father. That seems to me a very human reaction, even when a family has fallen out.
Yeah.
That you would come back and be with your dad when he's in trouble.
And of course, the cynics would say he needs to do that because of his profile and money making in America.
Well, I'm that cynic, and that's exactly what I would say. And I would wonder, you know, how if his father has a prolonged illness, how long it's going to last. Will Meghan and the kids come over?
Yeah. Right, we just got to take a quick break now. Still to come, is social media fueling playground misogyny in schools? There's a report saying it is. Stay with us. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
What you've got to do is, it's a collective. You've got to look like a meteorologist. Nobody out there is necessarily going to be a meteorologist, but what I do on a daily basis is I look globally. I look at what we've got in terms of the track of weather that we've had in the UK. So if you go back a couple of years and we go back to the heat wave of July, August 2022, 40.3 degrees, there's a dot in the landscape, and before then there was other incidents going on. Now that was a huge dot because that was extreme temperatures, and then we, you know, since then, last summer, although we didn't get that kind of record, we saw months with records, various months, May and June and September and October, all-time records. So another dot, and then you're looking again globally. What's going on globally? What's going on in China, in USA, in Africa, now in Australia, for example, records falling like 9 pins. So when these storms come along, you've got to say, OK, would they have happened anyway? The answer is probably yes. They probably would have done. But when you start getting where we're up to with Jocelyn is number 10, then that's not the record. The record is 11. Named storms, 2015-16. So we've been there before, but only a few years ago. So these things are starting to mount up. And do you know what? On the can of climate change, climatologists, better people than me, people who study this expertly, and they look at it and they say, OK, what we're going to get with extra dimension of heat in the atmosphere, which energy and heat that basically means that you've got more intense storms potentially that can carry more water. What do you get? You get higher wind velocities and you get more water and or snow. We've just gone through a period where parts of this country have been deluged and flooded for the first time.
Yes. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, they're still in the studio with us, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also broadcaster Tonya Buxton, and it is now 11:49 and we're going to talk about social media.
Yeah, so this is obviously, there's almost a week doesn't go by, Tonya, when there's a social media story in the papers. New findings now that algorithms which are promoting misogynistic, extremely misogynistic, anti-women, woman-hating material onto smartphones, which is affecting boys.
It's affecting boys and it's affecting girls. It's affecting everyone. And what happens is with these algorithms is you might watch one thing that was a bit funny and irreverent, as it were, but then the algorithm, over a 4-day period, just boosts up, so things get nastier and nastier and nastier. And it's exactly what Brianna Gray's mum was saying about the violence that they're seeing on social media. These algorithms need to be taken into account. The companies have to be accountable for what they're putting out. I don't believe in banning anything, but something's got to be done.
What age are people who are seeing this? I mean, they're quite young.
As young as the parents are stupid enough to buy them smartphones.
10 and 11.
Yeah.
This is the thing.
And of course, Brianna's mum says you shouldn't have them if until you're over 16.
I even think 16's quite young, but anyway, I agree with her. But it does alter the way you think, you know. And as they're saying, they're watching this, and then it's going into playgrounds now. And in playgrounds, they're thinking it's fine to be misogynistic and come out with these comments because they're being bombarded. Yeah. On their phones.
How depressing.
This is the problem with big tech. I mean, I think big tech is probably the greatest threat to free speech at the moment, largely because it is a huge threat to free thought. So here's an example that you find something on TikTok, and this is TikTok, but other social media companies are as guilty as they are. You find something, say, around masculinity, you're then bombarded on your particular feed with a load of stuff that makes it sound normal. And if you extend that, it's things like politics, that if you look up certain things, certain political things, and you get on your For Me your For Me feed, well, if they like that one, we'll send them more. So you never get alternative opinions coming through until eventually you think that becomes normal.
So it becomes a kind of echo chamber that you're always having these
so you're not thinking for yourself. And so also you've got these companies which are governing what you can read. So if you've got a news website, the algorithms will decide which of those stories will be promoted. So it might be entertainment one week or politics the next. But as a result of that, people aren't free to read what they want because they're bombarded with particular things.
I'm so sorry, both of you, but we are going to cut live now across to Westminster, where the former Prime Minister Liz Truss is speaking at the launch of her new group, Popular Conservatives. Here they are.
Was deported. And yet, however hard the government tries, it seems to be very, very difficult, and they are constantly being stymied. So why is this? Why have we got into this position? And I believe the fundamental issue is that for years and years and years, and I think it goes back 2 decades, Conservatives have not taken on the left-wing extremists. Now, these people have repurposed themselves. They don't admit they're socialists or communists anymore. They say they're environmentalists. They say that they're in favour of helping people across all communities. They are in favour of supporting LGBT people or groups of ethnic minorities. So they no longer admit that they are collectivists, but that is what their ideology is about. It's all about taking power away from people and families and giving power to the state or unaccountable bodies. And the problem is that Conservatives have tried to appease these people. We've tried to triangulate. Met Greta. We've had Conservative governments legislating for self-identification. Now, I'm pleased to say we've stopped that legislation now. But this is a Conservative government allowing people to define themselves, whether or not they're a man or a woman, something which we know is a biological fact. And we've had pandering to the anti-capitalists as well, in terms of regulating business, regulating landlords, regulating small enterprises. And the problem is that when we don't know what we stand for, when we're not prepared to stand up for Conservative values, who is? And that has meant the landscape has shifted to the left. And I'm afraid, as Lee mentioned, too many of our colleagues are looking to what job they might get after they leave Parliament. They're looking to being popular at London dinner parties. I never get invited to any London dinner parties, so it's not an issue. It's not an issue for me. Oh, I feel some invitations coming on after that. But people don't want to be unpopular. But the irony is that these policies are popular. When I go out canvassing, and I'm very pleased to see some of my excellent canvassing team here today, when I go out canvassing in Norfolk, people want us to deal with immigration. They don't like net zero policies that make energy more expensive. They think the wokery that's going on is nonsense, and they are frustrated that they feel unable to say what they think. So there is a damaging divide between those who are making the decisions, those in the elite around the M25, and those people on the ground. I'm afraid we have not taken on the left enough. And the left don't just compete with us at the ballot box now. They also work to take over our institutions. And we've seen that. We see it in much of the media. We see it in corporations. We see it most of all in the quangos and government bureaucracy that emerged under Tony Blair. But we didn't do enough to change it. We didn't do enough to take the power back. And Jacob makes a very good point about the legal system, but that is true with the Environment Agency, it's true with Natural England, it's true with the Office of Budget Responsibility, it's true with the Post Office. This is a problem that goes wider than just one government department. It goes right to the way we do government overall. And what that means is it means that the people making decisions aren't elected. And I know, having spent 10 years as in the government, as a minister and ultimately as Prime Minister, that often as a minister in Britain, you have responsibility without having power. And that is a huge issue. It's a diminution of parliamentary sovereignty, which is what has made Britain a great country. Because we have such a direct link from members of Parliament to the people that vote for us, they are able to kick us out. I mean, none of us are saying, by the way, that MPs are brilliant or infallible, but we certainly are ejectable. And I myself have been at the sharp end of that. So I can tell you we are deeply accountable. And what happens when decisions are made by people who aren't accountable? Well, over time, they drift to listening to the vested interests, listening to those that advocate the status quo. They become out of touch with what ordinary citizens across Britain want. And by the way, the answer to this is not a Labour government, far from it. What we know is that Keir Starmer would enhance the power of these so-called independent bodies. He'd enhance the power of these quangos. He'd outsource more decision-making to his friends in Islington, which is where a lot of them live. And we would find it even harder for us to get the Conservative policies that will really help transform our country. And that is what we need to do. But what I really want to say to people today, and I'm so delighted to be joined by such a fantastic array of colleagues and future colleagues, is it's not just enough to will the answers. You know, you can watch GB News or you can read The Telegraph and you can hear people talking about brilliant policies every day. Why don't we do this to cut immigration? Why don't we do this to reform the city? Why don't we do this to improve education? It's not enough to just have the policies when the system is actively working to stop those policies happen. Conservatives really need to be thinking about how we change the system itself and how we create the political weather that enable these policies to happen. Because it's difficult being a Conservative at the moment. It's difficult advocating these causes. And it's why we need a popular Conservative movement to actually challenge from below what is happening in our country. And that's why I'm so delighted that Mark has taken on the mantle of leading popular conservatism. And there are three things I think we need to achieve. First of all, we need to make the case for democratic accountability. The fact is that democracy has become unfashionable. If you ask the under-30s what they think of democracy, there's not a very polite response. But we know it's the only way to deliver effective government, effective policies, and our fundamental freedoms as British people. And we need to restore faith in democracy, and we can only do that by restoring democratic accountability. The second thing we need to do is galvanise our Conservative forces. Now, Britain is full of secret Conservatives, people who agree with us but don't want to admit it because they think it's not acceptable in their place of work, it's not acceptable at their school. And people who are prepared to put their heads above the parapet and come out and stand as Conservative candidates, make Conservative arguments, are vitally important. So this organisation is not just about the members of Parliament. It's not just about the parliamentary candidates. It's actually about all of you and supporting all of you to be prepared to go and make those arguments with your friends and colleagues. We need to provide each other with support because the left is tough. You know, they tried to drown us out, literally, in the case of Steve Bray. And we have to have resilience and bravery to take on that fight. And the final thing we need to do is communicate with the public about our policies in an effective way. And I think Lee hits the nail on the head here. We need to communicate and show how people's lives will be improved by these policies. Too much time is spent talking about personality issues in the Westminster bubble. That's not what people want to hear. What people want to hear is how are we going to help them make their own lives better? How are we going to help make Britain more successful? How are we going to defend our country? Now, this fight is not going to be easy. The left have been on the march. They've been on the march in our institutions. They've been on the march in our corporate world. They're on the march globally. They are actively organising. But I believe this fight's important because I believe it's only through Conservative values that we will give the people of Britain what they want. I feel it's only through Conservative values that we will ensure the successful future of our nation. And I think the successful future of Britain is vitally important for the successful future of the West. So please join our organisation, get involved. This is just the beginning. Thank you.
Well, that was former Prime Minister Liz Truss at the launch of Popcon, Popular Conservatives. And
so
we've got...
Tom is here in the studio, as you can hear him, and he's brought a suitable snack for the occasion, an appropriate snack for the occasion. These sorts of things are very exciting for Tom. But Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister there, essentially saying that the government has failed to take on left-wing extremists. She talked about immigration, she talked about wokery in our institutions, she talked about net zero too and how it's strangling our economy.
She said that Britain is full of what she termed as secret conservatives, people who believe in the things that she believes in conservative ideas but don't feel able to express those ideas in their place of work or in their social circles.
Yes, let us know what you make of what Liz Truss had to say there. GBViews at